Hey everyone, welcome to today's session, which is all about inference. Now, I know that inference is arguably one of the toughest question types out there in GMAT Critical Reasoning, and that's why we are doing this session today. Now, if you're like me, you know that inference is a little tricky. We're going to discuss a lot of things that are useful for you, some concepts, some fundamentals, some processes and principles I want you to keep in mind, and so on and so forth. Spend 2 hours with me, and hopefully, you will be much more confident as far as inference questions on GMAT critical reasoning are concerned. All right, sounds like fun. This is actually part of an entire series of sessions that I'm bringing to you. So, we tentatively slated for around 4 sessions. It's all about verbal, and of course, most of it is CR A to Z. Why does that? What does that mean? I'm going to focus on specific content related to verbal. We're going to do some inference. Next session, if you guys are looking forward to it, it's going to be about the assumption family, assumption, strengthen, weaken, so on and so forth. And we'll pick very specific question types where I typically see a lot of students falter, including my own students. My name is Harsha, and I am an independent GMAT tutor. I've been in this industry for a little over half a decade, and I really enjoy interacting with students and trying to help them crack all of GMAT. Right? So that's just one short, boring intro about me. Let's get right to it. What are we here to do? Today, it's all about trying to help you get better at inference type questions. We're going to cover a lot of ground. So there will be places where I hope to move quickly, and there'll be places where I will really deliberate a lot. Either way, you're going to get a lot of value out of it. That's my hope. So we're going to discuss some fundamentals, some definitions, some key patterns. One of the most important things I realize is how to ID the correct question type. I often find that we tend to confuse inference with something like strengthen, and we'll be discussing that as well. And of course, no session is complete without us solving a ton of questions. We'll solve some different types of inference questions. Some of you may be curious, what do I mean by inference type questions? Isn't there just one? So we're going to get into all that and more pretty soon, right? So straight to it. What is an inference? And I really want you to be very, very clear about this. What do I mean by an inference? So something that absolutely must be true based on the given information. That's one way to look at it, and that's a very important way to look at it. Now, imagine I gave you a set of statements, some information that I've given to you. What is an inference? Something that must also be true, right? That's the fundamental definition of an inference. Another point of view I want you to keep in mind is, especially on the GMAT, when you're talking about inferences, what they really expect us to do is figure out what is something that you can logically conclude. Now, that is almost the same. End of the day, you are arriving at something that logically has to flow from the information. But as of now, I just want you to keep track of both these ideas. Something that absolutely must be true, and something that is a very well supported logical conclusion based on the given information. I hope that's clear. Let's move. Here is your first exercise for the day, and we are going to be doing a lot of exercises. So, simple, there's a statement there. Any inference comes to mind. I look forward to seeing some answers here. I do see a couple of questions. We will be touching assumptions. That's coming soon. That's the very next session that I'll be doing with you guys. Do check that out when it comes, right? And difference between inference and conclusion. That's kind of what we're going to deliberate on. But yeah, we'll get to that. Any answers, any inference that comes to mind? I've given you this beautiful statement right here. If nothing, I will happily proceed, but I'm just waiting if there are enough people here, somebody has something to say. What would you infer if I gave you this? And that also, by the way, is interesting. I'm giving you a free exercise without answer choices. That's really testing you on your ability to draw inferences, right? Yeah, thanks for that, Karthik. Determination is only necessary for consistently being successful. Very interesting point. You added an only there. Determination is only necessary. We'll talk about that. Determination is the driving force. Oh, I like that as well. But let's be a little precise. Let's get right into it. One of the factors to succeed is determination, and it is essential. That's a very good answer. That is something I'm extremely in line with. So let's discuss. Think about what is given to us. We are given that, hey, determination is something that is an essential factor for one to be consistently successful. So let's think about that. What does that mean when I say that determination is an essential factor? Fundamentally, it means that determination is a must for success, for consistent success. And when I say it's a must, what does it mean? If you're not determined, there's no way in hell you're going to be consistently successful. That's what it means. You might not be determined, and if you're not determined, you're not going to be successful, right? So the meaning of must or essential, or for those of you who like the very well-known CR terminology, the word necessary should come to mind. Determination is an essential or necessary or a must factor for one to be consistently successful. But what that really means and what the author is really trying to tell you is, hey, if a person is not determined, there is no way this guy is going to be consistently successful. I hope that is clear. This is an example of what I call a valid inference. One who lacks determination, there's no way that guy is going to be consistently successful. There could be others that you could think of, but this is a valid inference. Let me also give you a quick example of what is not a valid inference. So if I give you a statement, one who has determination will be consistently successful. I did notice that some of us, put an only there. This was kind of somewhere in the vicinity of valid inference as far as some of you guys. So let's clarify that. Here's the point. All I know is that determination is a must or it is essential for success. I do not know if there are any other essential factors. Okay, we think that determination is essential for success, but what if intelligence is essential for success? What if luck is essential to success? Now, in that case, for example, even if somebody is a very determined person, there's no guarantee that this person is going to be consistently successful. Why? Because maybe that guy is just unlucky, plain unlucky, man. Or the person lacks the intelligence, which is also a necessary condition for consistent success. Now, I hope this gives you a good picture of what we mean by inference and what is probably not a valid inference, right? You're looking for something that actually has to follow from the given information. Now, some of you might have wondered, definitely, even as you saw the YouTube thumbnail and all that. What is this inference family? Why is it not just one question type, right? Here's the thing. On the GMAT, you do expect some variations of this. All of them come under this big bucket called inference, as far as I'm concerned. But there are some subtle variations. So let's understand what those are. Occasionally, you will see a pure inference question. So this is of the type, which of the following can be properly inferred? If the given information is true, what is it that must also be true? Now here you're looking for a very strict answer. So if this is true, that absolutely has to be true. Now, most of the times what you'll actually see on the GMAT is something which I like to call logically supported conclusion. And here are some examples of what it looks like. If I give you that, hey, if the statements above are true, which of the conclusions, which of the following conclusions is best supported by those above statements? Look at the second one. The statements above most support which of the following conclusions? The third one, of the following claims. Now, it's not even that I'm concluding some very factual truth based on the given information. Of the following claims, which one is most strongly supported by the statements given? Now, here's what I really want you to understand here. You notice all these words like best and most. They're there for a reason. They're telling you that, hey, as far as this question is concerned, there are 5 answer choices. Find that one choice that is most well supported by the information. So as you can see, it's slightly less strict than inference is, but it's still under the inference bucket. So I need for a question like this, I would need to reject 4 choices because they're not logically supported. There's no real basis, there's no real support for that particular choice, and there'll be one choice which actually flows naturally from that particular choice. All right. Now, you also get these variation questions, these funky variation questions. Sometimes you'll see an inference except. So which of the following which of the following statements cannot be inferred? So you're looking for four statements that can be inferred and one that cannot. And sometimes there are variations like this. It's not asking you what must be true or what can be inferred. It's asking you for what could be true, right? Similar to quant, right? You have seen all those must be true, could be true questions. Those are all inference questions in quant. You have a similar variety in verbal as well. And of course, I'm sure if you guys have been preparing for CR, you're familiar with the fill in the blanks logically completes question type. Now, some of those are strengthened questions, some of those are actually inference questions. You will have to go through them to figure out which is which. So, everybody with me so far, give me a yes. You're with me, you're following what I'm saying so that I know how things are. And just give me a second, guys. There's a small disturbance here. Right. Sorry about that. Let's get back to it. So, meanwhile, everybody with me so far? Good. Participate, guys. That way I know that, I'm not speaking to a blank wall, right? So, there you go. So, let's continue. Now, one of the key problem areas, and I've seen this even as recently as yesterday. So I had a session yesterday, and one of the questions that we discussed, we actually saw this. It was an inference type question, but my student was convinced that it was a strengthened question, so we had to reorient that. So being able to identify whether you're dealing with one of these inference type questions or whether you're dealing with some other question type is super important. Imagine the situation otherwise. You misdiagnose the question type, and therefore everything you're doing since then is gambling, right? So I'm going to give you a couple of exercises just to give you a feel for this. Here is question one. There's going to be a lot of exercises. I just hope that you guys participate. That way, things move very fast. So you don't have to, I'm not giving you option choices. The objective is just read what I've given you, read the question stem, and just tell me what the question type is. Is it some inference based question type or is it something else? That's the exercise. Yes, I see answers coming in. Thanks for that. So, assumption based, you're not wrong. Strengthen, you're not wrong. Now, if you tell me this is an inference question, perhaps you're wrong. If you really think about it, this is an argument, this is a CR argument rather than a CR passage. And what we see here is there is a very clear conclusion being made. And my next session is going to cover arguments in excruciating detail. So, if you're struggling with this a little bit, you should check that out. So, what we see here is there's a clearly defined conclusion, and look at the question statement. Which of the following statements, if true, would most logically support the conclusion above? So, you're not being asked to arrive at a conclusion that's logically, based on the statements that are given. You're asked to kind of strengthen the given conclusion. So, this is actually a strengthened question. Let's move to the next example. Now, some of you might wonder why we're discussing these basics, because some of us do falter here, and it's my job to ensure that I give you some clarity on this, right? Let's do the next one. All right. I'm happy to see some answers pour in. Yes, Tanmay, absolutely right, spot on here. This is an inference question. And I will be sharing the PDF and all with you. So at that point, do check out if you have slight bit of confusion, you should check this out. Make sure you're absolutely clear about what is an inference, what is a strengthened question. Here, I've just given you a set of facts. These are two statements. I've given you no conclusion. This is not even an argument. And I'm asking you the question, the above information most logically supports which of the following conclusions? So my answer choices are conclusions that logically follow from the given information. This should strike you as an inference. So I hope we're building clarity on this. Let's do one more example before we move into the next question. So what are we dealing with here? I hope you guys are not sitting and solving this now. We have other questions to solve. Ah, so I see one answer that says it's an inference. Anyone else? If no, I will keep moving on. Let's push. Plus evaluate maybe. Oh, that's interesting. It cannot be infer and evaluate to answer that question. That's a interesting point of view. Uh, it's actually more of a strengthened question than anything else, because what you'll see here is, again, this is actually an argument in disguise. I've given you, there's a very clear conclusion. The clue is in that word clearly as well. So what am I giving you? The city's new bike sharing program, hey, it has reduced traffic congestion by 15% in the downtown area. The program has clearly improved the quality of life in the downtown area. Notice the author is taking a stand here. And then you see what's happening. The author is now trying to justify that position. The author wants to say the program has clearly improved the quality of life in the downtown area because, in addition to the noticeable reduction in traffic congestion, something else. So, I need something here which will justify why the program has clearly improved the quality of life. And of course, there is another clue here. I did say it's an argument. Usually, when you see, typically, not always, but typically, when you see strengthen, you're dealing with argument. With inference, you're dealing with passages, right? So, uh, I hope you guys can see that this is actually a conclusion being stated, and which the author is trying to justify in some way. And therefore, when the question here asks you which of the following most logically completes the argument, they expect you to fill that blank with something that would fit as a premise. In other words, something that would make you believe more in the argument. That's what a premise should do, right? It helps build the case. In other words, this is a strengthened question. Now, just to hammer that point home, here is a very slightly changed version of that, where here we are actually dealing with an inference question. We are asked to find out, we are given a couple of factoids, some statements that are given to us, no conclusions here. The city's new bike sharing program has reduced traffic congestion. Additionally, there's this air quality reduction, air quality measurements have shown some improvement. All of that is good. All of those are facts. The author has not made a conclusion yet. Now, the question is asking us, what can I conclude? What would be logical to conclude based on these given facts? Right? So basically, we judge the tone here. Now we are judging whether it's an argument or a passage, whether there is a central claim the author is making. To answer your question, Tanmay, here the author is stating a conclusion, whereas here the author is just giving you facts. Now I want to give you a way to actually, simplify this. Let's look at how to not mix up inference with strengthen, because that's what happens quite a few times if you're not careful. Now, the problem, what makes this a little complex, is the fact that you see a lot of similar terminology. You would see most supports, most strongly supports. So that phrasing makes it difficult. But usually, what is a very good clue is something that's a characteristic of strengthen questions, but not usually inference questions. Remember what your correct answer choice must do in an inference question. In an inference question, remember you have some information, you're trying to figure out what is true. Your conclusion, your answer choice should be something that logically flows as true. So you're trying to identify if your answer choice is true or not. Whereas if you look at strengthened questions, you will usually see this phrasing. Even in the question here, which I presented, you'll see this phrasing very often. I'm not saying it's always the case, but this is a good way to approach this if necessary. You'll see this phrasing if true. What does if true mean? Essentially, we are being told, hey, when you look at these answer choices, consider that each of these choices is true. Assume that this is true, and then figure out whether it has a strengthening impact on my argument or not. So assume that it's true, and then see, does it strengthen, does it weaken, does it have absolutely no impact? If it strengthens, that's your answer, right? So typically this phrasing is something you all, this if true is something you'll see with strengthen and not with inference. So that's one way to go about it. But I don't believe in hacks much. You should be able to figure out if it's an inference or strengthen question just by reading the argument. You should figure out it's an argument, there's a conclusion being made, you're being asked to strengthen, right? But here's a way to go about it. I hope that helps for at least some of you. Some quick takeaways. Inference, something that must be true. At the very least, think about something that's logical to conclude based on the given information. Some questions will require that angle to it. We kind of went through the question types there, and of course, I'm sharing this with you. You don't need to, no, we don't need to deliberate on this further. But end of the day, I want you to read those question stems very carefully, because otherwise you're in for a rude surprise as far as this question type is concerned. I hope that helps. Let's move to exercises. Let's learn other stuff. So I've given you a passage. It's a fairly simple enough passage, but the task is we're going to see each and every statement, and you could just give me yes, yes, no, no. If the statement is a valid inference, we say yes. If it's not a valid inference, we say no, right? And the second I start seeing some responses, I'm going to plow right through this. Again, what I'm trying to do here, what I'm trying to achieve here is a sense of calibration of what constitutes a good inference, and some trap choices and how to avoid them. We're going to discuss that, all this and more with these exercises. Yeah, good to see some answers, Puran. Yes, yes, no, no. Okay. So, Dolly, that yes is for question one, question two. Which one? No, yes, no. Oh, yeah, quite a few answers. So, assuming that most of you are done with this, let's move. Let's understand. So, no, no, yes, no. Anyone has given me no, 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 no? I'm just wondering. So let's kind of go through this. some very interesting answers there, and this will help us, calibrate inferences and how they work, right? So, what is given to us? A detective's job is to solve cases. Jake has been one of the best detectives in the police force this year. Great. Detective's job is to solve cases. Jake has been one of the best detectives this year in the police force. Now, which of these statements is a valid inference? Jake will get promoted soon. Now, all I know from the given information is that Jake is one of the best detectives. This is known. Jake is one of the best detectives. Is it anywhere suggested? Can I really say that whoever is among the best is going to get a promotion? Maybe we are looking at a scenario where nobody's going to get a promotion this year, right? There are so many other factors that determine promotion. Would it be wise of us to just assume that somebody who is the best detective will get a promotion? Not really. The answer is no. Some of you told me the answer for statement 2 is yes, but let me surprise you a little bit. The answer there is also no, right? Why is that? Even the likelihood of promotion is not something you can figure out here. You have no idea what constitutes a promotion. Does one have to be one of the best detectives to get a promotion? Is that the basis, or is there something else? You might think that's obvious. It has to be best detective should get a promotion. We don't know that. Are we assuming something's there? So even this high probability or likelihood of a promotion, it's not a valid inference. And for those of you who chose yes, I hope you get some clarity here. Now let's talk about statement 3. Now here we are looking at something that's very interesting. So Jake's performance as a detective has been good for the last few years. Notice this for the last few years. Firstly, I'm not even sure if Jake could be one of the best detectives even though his performance is bad because everybody else sucks, right? So all I know is one of the best detectives. Is he even good? We don't know. But the bigger red flag for me is for the last few years. All I know is Jake is one of the best detectives this year. How do I know that Jake's performance has been awesome or good for the last few years? Here we are actually reaching, you're overreaching here. You can't infer this. So this is also a no. And choice 4 is very interesting. It's what I like to call, you're really going for a very strong inference which may not work. Jake has performed better than everyone else as a detective. So detective's job is to solve cases. Jake has been one of the best detectives. Notice he's just one of the best detectives, not necessarily the best detective. So isn't it realistically possible that somebody might have performed better than Jake? Can we really be sure that Jake has performed better than each and everyone else? And so this one is also a no. So I hope we're getting calibrated here as far as inferences are concerned. Here, we're going to take it up a notch. That first choice, I think, is very easy. But after that, let's see. Let me know, guys. You can just put your answers as YYNN or YNNY or something as soon as you're ready. All right. Good to see some answers pouring in. No, yes, no, yes. Ah, that's interesting. No, yes, no, no. Also very interesting. Good. Good to see this. Good to see this. So we're all thinking. I hope you guys are enjoying inferences. I really believe that if you want to do well on the exam, start enjoying every bit of learning that you get. Whether it's inference, whether it's quant, doesn't matter. You should start enjoying what you're doing. So no, 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 yes, no, yes. All right, quite a few good answers there. Let's discuss. Again, the passage is the same. You guys would have observed that. The question is the same. Let's just go to the statements. Right. Now, the first one is very easy to reject. It's what we call a completely irrelevant choice. Has nothing to do with this. So I'm sure all of you have rejected this. Some of you said yes for statement 2. It is likely that Jake has the most number of solved cases among the detectives in the police force this year. Sounds like a lot of the specifics you need are there. This year, likelihood, because you can't be sure, most number of solved cases. Here's a deal, guys. Again, all I know is that Jake is one of the best detectives. But you have to ask the question. The author has not told you what constitutes a best detective. What makes somebody one of the best detectives? For instance, are you just assuming that the best detective has the most number of solved cases? Maybe, for all we know, the best detective is somebody who solves more number of cases compared to unsolved. That solved unsolved ratio might be the thing. Maybe it really is the number of total cases solved, or maybe, just maybe, it could be something else entirely. For all you know, a person might be a best detective, might be one of the best detectives because that person solves the toughest cases out there. So this guy doesn't solve 100 cases. So somebody else might solve 100 cases. This guy solves 30 cases. And even in those 30 cases, this person has a success rate of 10, for all you know. But this guy is tasked with all the tough cases that nobody else is able to touch. And therefore, you know, the point I'm trying to make is we have no idea what best detective really means. What decides if one is a best detective? Is it based on, no number of cases? Is it based on solved to unsolved ratio? Is it based on something else? We don't know any of that. And therefore, the answer for this is a no. More cases than unsolved is also a no for the same reason. Now, some of you, right, some of you did tell me the right answer for this one. I'm very happy to see that. This is a yes. Because again, based on all the information given, this is very logical to say. Why is that? I do know that the best detectives out there, they are going to get a medal this year. They are slated to get a medal this year. And of course, Jake, we already know, is one of the best detectives. So, data point number one, the best detective get a medal. The best detectives get a medal. Data point number two, Jake is one of those best detectives. So it's a very logical inference based on just the given information to say that yes, we do expect Jake to get a medal, and that's why this is a correct one, right? Well, it wouldn't be so. Aditya has a good question. Well, it wouldn't be good at painting, right? Yeah, it doesn't common sense apply here. Common sense is always applicable here, but here's my point. Best detective, you still don't know, right? Is it absolutely common sense to say best detective solves the most number of cases? How do you know that? I would say the common sense dictates that best detective should be solving the toughest cases, or best detective is that person who has a better solved to unsolved ratio. You cannot be sure of any of it, right? So common sense is very important on the GMAT, including inference, and we'll solve some very tough questions down the line, hopefully, where I'm going to show you that you have to really think real life and common sense. But I don't think this is that case, right? I hope that answers, Aditya. So some quick takeaways, and this is one of the core. You guys have seen it in the YouTube thumbnail, but this is one of the core lessons that I want to really, you know, talk about. Don't assume things of your own. For instance, best detectives, they will get a promotion. That's an assumption. The best detectives would have solved more cases than they could not solve. It's an assumption. Without a very, very, very strong basis, let's not assume stuff, right? That's very important as a way to solve inference questions, right? Another thing that you'd observe is the process, right? Always it starts with being very clear about the information first. So in a question, when I'm solving CR inference questions, I try to look at, if I have to reread the given information just so that I'm clear about it, I don't mind doing that. That's still a better investment than going directly to choices most of the times, right? But the question that you always ask is, hey, does this logically follow from the information given? Is this really true? Is this necessarily true? If you can very easily see other scenarios, it's probably not a good choice, right? Another thing is, in terms of pattern, there's one thing we did here. I gave you information about this entity, this person called Jake, and I asked you a ton of questions about Jake. It would be foolish of us to assume that just because I'm asking you things about the same entity, I can infer things. Nothing like that. Just assess each statement carefully, right? Be wary of choices that are too strong, or in other words, don't overreach. An example for that is, you do know as a fact that Jake is one of the best detectives. So clearly he's better. He must have performed better than some people, given that performance is about solving cases and all that. But to say that Jake has performed better than everybody else is an overreach. You really can't go that far, right? So I hope that helps. Meanwhile, now let's again. I'm not just gonna make you solve all these small questions. Let's do a full length question. This one is of course from the OG. This qualifies as medium. Solve, give me the answer, and then let's discuss. Meanwhile, I'll just go through whatever the comments are there. All right, I do see some answers coming in. I see C, I see D. What else? Any other interesting answer choices? There's usually one that I often see. More C's, I like that. All right, let's get into discussing this. So, again, very interesting question. And I don't want to just discuss the choices, I also want to give you a little bit of insight into the passage itself, the way we read the passage itself. So, let's kind of jump into it. Lofgren's disease has been observed frequently in commercially raised cattle, but very rarely in chickens. Now, one of the good principles I believe is to, you know, take your time with the passage, pause after you read a sentence, and try to figure out what the author is really trying to say. Right? For instance, we are being told that hey, there is this disease called Lofgren's. It's been observed frequently. So it's been observed or seen frequently where it's seen frequently in cattle, barely ever seen in chickens. That's a fact. Interesting. Let's move. Both cattle and chickens raised for meat are often fed the type of feed that transmits the virus. Now, this sentence tells you something, right? Of course, beyond what is stated, it tells you something. It should at least make you wonder how is it that both cattle and chicken are eating food that can give you the virus? So the VF stands for virus food. How is it that they're both having food that can, get you infected, but you're observing the symptoms, you're observing Lofgren's disease only in cattle, but not in chickens? If you think about it, the author has actually explained something which seems like a paradoxical situation, right? Oh, everybody, cattle, chicken, they're all eating food that can get you infected, but we are seeing it only in cattle. We're not really seeing this disease in chicken. I hope as you're reading the sentences, your brain is going into this layer of understanding implied ideas. What is it that the author is actually, what is the story that the author is actually painting here? So, as of sentence two, the author has presented a rather puzzling scenario. How is it that it's not seen in chickens despite chickens also having the same food that can get you the virus? And once you read the next sentence, you realize that the author has actually explained that. So the author has presented a paradox and he's kind of explained it. What is the logic here? Hey, it takes more than 1 year to develop the symptoms. And number two, chickens are brought to market and presumably eaten within a year, therefore. So think about the scenario, think about what the author is trying to say. So chicken are eaten within a year before we get a chance to observe those symptoms. So at this point, you understand why is it that the disease is not really seen in chickens, but it's seen extensively in cattle, because most probably the chicken is getting consumed well before the symptoms are visible. I hope this was clear. Now, I'm happy to see a lot of those choices. Choice C is right. Right. Let's quickly run through the choices here. Uh, virus that causes Lofgren's disease cannot be transmitted to human beings. I hope you see this is again something you cannot really say. Maybe we're all consuming chicken which has that virus. Maybe it can be transferred. The passage does not really tell us that it cannot be transmitted to human beings. Let's reject this. Now, I'm actually happy to see choice B is actually the most popular trap choice here. So I'm actually happy to see that not many of you went for it. It says there's no way to determine whether a chicken is infected with this disease before the chicken shows symptoms. What I know from the passage is that the symptoms are not being observed because we are consuming them. It's going to market before a year. That doesn't mean there is no way to determine. For instance, you could just do perhaps just do a blood test and you will figure out that the chicken is infected, even if you have not yet seen the symptoms, right? So I didn't see people go for B, but I hope this is clear. This is kind of the trap choice. It kind of goes into that overreach territory. I know that I'm not seeing the observations, I'm not observing the symptoms. Doesn't mean that there is absolutely no way to determine if the chicken is infected. So I hope this helps. There's no way to determine should be the red flag that you should think about. And what this also means is be very careful with answer choice analysis. You have to read the entire sentence, figure out what the choice is trying to say. Don't rush, right? So let's go to choice C, which is actually the correct choice. I'm happy to see that. Some of you at least definitely chose this. What does it say? What is it trying to say? And again, don't just read the choice, get into this layer of implications. What is the choice trying to say? So, a failure to observe Lofgren disease. Okay. So, if you fail to observe this disease in commercial chicken populations, that's not good evidence. Good evidence of what? It's not good evidence that the chicken is immune to the virus. That makes a lot of sense. If you fail to observe the disease, that's as per what the passage established. It's not necessarily because the chicken is not infected. It's more that you are consuming the chicken, it's going to market before the symptoms develop. In that case, a failure to observe the disease, you should not be counting it as good evidence that the chicken is immune to the virus, because for all you know, we're all consuming infected chicken at this point, right? I hope this helps. So choice C, for those of you who did not choose choice C, I hope this explanation clarifies. It's the right answer. Choice D and E, I think, are fairly easy to reject. I think one of you did choose choice D, so let's quickly run through that. An animal that has been infected with a virus that causes Lofgren's disease, but that has not yet developed symptoms. Now, this could be chicken or cattle. Before 1 year, none of them are developing symptoms, right? Or any other creature also. The point is, an animal that's been infected but has not yet shown the symptoms, has not yet developed the symptoms, it cannot transmit the disease to an uninfected animal. How do we know that? You're telling me that chicken cannot transmit to chicken or cattle cannot transmit to cattle, right? We don't know that. The passage does not go into that territory at all. So that's how we reject D. And of course, we don't know if it's the only source or it's not the only source. No, nothing in the passage provides any information on this. I hope this helps. This was a medium level question. It goes into if you go and check on GMAT Club, this would be your 605 to 655 level question. I'll just take a couple of questions. Tanmay, hey Harsha, just one doubt. When we are solving in inference questions, do we not assume at all? We try our best not to assume. Pure inference question, I won't assume a thing. And if it's those questions like this one, which of the following is most strongly supported? Again, I'm not trying to assume, but it's also a process of elimination game. Which of the four choices has absolutely no real support? Which of them is reasonably well supported? I don't necessarily have to assume stuff, but again, there's a very slight degree of uh, less strictness there, right? To put it that way. This is actually an official question. It is an official question. I haven't recycled it here. That's a good point, GMAT Guru. This is the actual question as it is, right? How do you set this up on your scratch paper when taking the exam? Good question. I actually like one of the things I found beneficial is scribbling A, B, C, D for perhaps like 5 questions at a time. Or you could do it at the start of your exam as well, and then working through. So if I am sure of rejecting something, I would just scratch it. If I'm still unclear, I want to keep it on hold, I might do something like this. If I'm very sure, I might do something like this. But yeah, you have your scratch pad. Even before the section starts, you can start filling it in. Every 5 questions, you can fill it in. There are ways to do that. Good, let's move. So, some quick notes and ideas here. Don't just read the passage, try to figure out implied ideas. You notice that the author was trying to tell you something through each of those sentences. The more you push that muscle, the stronger your comprehension is. The stronger your comprehension is, the better your reasoning. Everything starts with comprehending, and comprehending starts with not just looking at stated ideas, also trying to see what the author is trying to tell you, right? So I also showed you to be very granular in choice analysis. It don't go by vibe or what it feels like. What is it actually saying? Literally, and in terms of implied ideas, what is it trying to tell us? Right? This idea of, oh, this doesn't feel like the right answer is perhaps a way to, go wrong very quickly in these questions. And one of the things that you perhaps observed me do is one of the ways to reject incorrect choices, at least, is can I show that this need not be true? For instance, I'm considering the scenario. What if I could just take a blood test? That way, even if the symptom is not visible, I test the blood, I might figure out that, the chicken is infected. This is me trying to figure out that, hey, does it really have to be true? Can I show that it's not true? Because I can show that it's reasonably not necessarily true. That's a way to reject the choice, right? So, a very quick note on the process of solving. In inference, it's very, very simple. Don't overcomplicate it. End of the day, there's some information given to you. I am not a fan of reading the question stem first, because often the question stem contains a lot of, it's not always something like, what is an assumption or what is an inference. Sometimes there is some text which is related to the given information, and reading that without the context doesn't work. So usually I prefer reading the given information first. And even before I go to the question stem, here is a checkpoint that you want to try and incorporate. Really think, have you really understood it? If you have not understood it at all, maybe give a few seconds, give an extra 20 seconds and try to figure it out right there, because that will save you a lot of heartburn downstream. Then, of course, I think I've shown you one thing today, that is those question stems matter. Are you dealing with a pure inference question? Are you dealing with a strengthened question? What is it you're dealing with? Be very, very clear about it, right? And even here, you do have a checkpoint where you can, once you've seen that this is okay, this is an inference question or this is an assumption question, okay, do I need to go back? Do I need to go and check the conclusion again if it's an assumption question? Is the passage clear? Do I want to go back? You still have the choice here. Now, choice analysis is where a lot of us falter. And very quickly, something you need to understand about choice analysis: just because you read a choice doesn't mean you understood the choice. So, most of us, myself included, occasionally have this bad habit of reading the choice and jumping to analysis. But what I want you to do is have a checkpoint here, right? Have you really understood what you read? And I don't mean just 1 or 2 words, the full and complete meaning of what you read. So a choice B here, when they says that there is no way to determine whether a chicken is infected, before it starts showing symptoms, is that idea clear to you? Else, you may want to pause here, give yourself a few seconds just to ensure that you've understood the choice. Once you have understood the choice, the analysis is usually much more straightforward. With all of CR, you'll know what to do with each of these question types, right? But first, ensure you've understood stuff. So, all these checkpoints that I'm showing you, if you're not already doing this, then it's a very conscious process. It feels a little painful, but once you get used to it, it becomes intuitive, automatic. You won't even notice you're doing it, but you'll see your accuracy pick up. All right. End of the day, what I was really looking for here is, one of the important aspects is quantifiers. You should understand what these words mean. And of course, I'm sharing the tech with you. You should understand what these words mean, what these words don't mean, right? When you talk about some, it means practically not none. So more than zero. 0%. You should, if it's countable, at least one. Most is majority, none, few, many. You can go through this in detail. But the point is, as far as your inference studying of inference is concerned, you have to pay some attention here. You have to be absolutely clear about what these things mean. Okay. Let's move on. Let's take it up a notch with a different example. Just give me your yes, no's. I do see a question. Do you map out the question? So, good question, Bio. So, do I map out the question on the scratch pad? This entirely depends on the complexity of the question. There are a lot of questions where I feel that, I don't need to put pen to paper, but that's a very individual thing. Your judgment there may vary from mine. There are some cases where it may really be better to put pen to paper. So maybe the Lofgren disease may not be one of those scenarios for me, but there are questions where I benefited just by putting pen to paper. And I actually have a couple of those questions lined up. Yeah. So answers are coming in. I see N, 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 N. Any more answers? Okay, I think everybody is very confident about N, 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 N here. Uh, So, can somebody, kind of write down what is the logic here? Is it that I'm only giving you information about apples, so I can't really infer anything about oranges? Is that why it's a blanket N N N N? I'm just asking all of you who are telling me N N N N. Is it something like that? That hey, I'm giving you information about apples, and I'm asking you questions about oranges. You know, out of scope. There's no way I can figure anything. Is that why? I also see an NNNY. We'll discuss that as well. But yeah, from all of you who wrote NNNN, just wondering, is that the logic here? More NNNYs are coming in, and I'm happy to see that. N, Y by N. All right, we'll see that as well. So, some of you absolutely right. Bio is right. Arunika is right. This sneaky little statement is actually valid. And here's the thing, right? Of course, I gave you information pretty much about apples, and I'm asking you questions about oranges. The automatic assumption, and some of this do this when we are faced with the more complex inference questions. We try to apply this very shallow logic in our head. Hey, I know I've been given information about apples, man. I don't know anything about oranges. So, no, no, no. Now, that is not always the case. So I'm a big proponent of not just making blanket rules as much as possible. So there are exceptions. When I'm not giving you any information about apples, but there is some logical connection between apples and oranges here. One of those connections that you see here is the number of fruits. It's all apples and oranges. Apples and oranges constitute those 100 fruits, right? Look at the first statement. There are 100 fruits in total, and it's all apples and oranges. Look at statement 2. Most of the fruits are apple. If most of the fruits are apple, that means at least 51 apples, if not more. What does that tell you about oranges? Immediately you know something about oranges. The number of oranges is definitely less than 50. It's going to be some number like 49 or something. Now here is a point. If the number of oranges is less than 50, how can the number of rotten oranges be greater than 50? It has to be a subset, right? Out of all the oranges, there are some perhaps which are rotten. If the number of oranges itself is less than 50, the number of rotten oranges has to be less than 50, right? Which actually makes this statement a yes. My finer point which I'm trying to make here is, don't just assume that if I give you information about entity X, there's nothing you can infer about entity Y. When there is a logical connection, you may be able to draw inferences, right? The rest is no. Can I say some of the orange? I have no idea if any of the oranges are rotten. Reject this. There are more rotten apples than are rotten oranges. Again, all of you are right to reject this. We have no idea. Higher proportion of apples are rotten? No. All I told you is among the apples, most of them are rotten. But it's possible that only 10% of apples are rotten, and on the other hand, some 30% of oranges are rotten. That's also possible. Nobody's stopping any of it. And by the way, if you want, you could take examples to understand this as well, if needed. But this last one, some of you absolutely did not see this. So what's happening there? Of course, quantifiers is okay, but look at this one. Don't assume that if I give you information about entity X, I'm never going to be able to infer anything about entity Y. Not always the case. Sometimes you figure out some logical connection. Something is given to connect A and B. You might be able to figure something out. Did that help? Let me know. Because these are some basic mistakes that if you fix right now, as you go into your CR prep, as you go hardcore into inferences and other question types, you won't make these mistakes. Everyone with me? Just from anyone who was confused on this earlier, would love to see that. If you got a bit of clarity on this. Also, at this point, it is a YouTube video. Please feel free to, like, let the algorithm also be happy. Right? All right. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Shiv. That's good. Good to know that. Right. So remember this idea. Sometimes you may be able to draw some, inferences about some other entity as well. Let's take it a little forward with perhaps a slightly more nuanced question. Now, in this case, this question stem is slightly different in the sense that only one answer choice is right. You don't have to give me yes, yes, no, no. Which of these four is correct? There's only one right answer. Good to see answers coming in. So, good. A lot of force. Any more answers? Excellent. Good. I'm actually very happy to see this. None of you fell for this trap choice called two, the choice two. So some of the CR questions that you see, whether it's inference or other question types, do have a mathematical flavor to it. That doesn't mean you need to be some math genius. Absolutely not. But general, quick, back of the envelope, backhand calculations are awesome. Here, what is given to me is that hey, for some reason the annual revenue stayed the same. I saw a reduction in my number of units sold, but still, for some reason, somehow my annual revenue actually stayed the same. Now, you see a lot of these kinds of questions, both in inference and even in assumption. Right? There are quite a few questions where one of the things that you are expected to do is figure out the logical relationship between these two entities. So, what is the logical relationship between annual revenue in this case and number of units? All of you who chose 4, definitely you understood this, right? It is that selling price that we're talking about. So revenue is number of units into selling price. Now this reduced by 20%. Somehow revenue remained the same. Something else must have increased to compensate for that, such that revenue remained the same. And that is selling price. So I hope those of you who chose 4, you did the math that you realize this 20% is wrong. It's 25%, right? So this became 4 by 5 of n. To ensure that revenue stays the same, you have to kind of multiply it by 5 by 4, which is actually 25% increase, not 20%. So If you are not ready to put pen to paper as necessary and do that very quick math, again you'll falter. That's one of the points. And often what you see, and another finer point is this, often you see that there's always a trap choice that they want to put somewhere in front, and the correct choice is somewhere at the back. So I think all of you would have easily rejected 1 and 3. Market share is completely out of scope. What is market share? In the, if product X, for instance, was a cell phone, in the cell phone market, what percentage of that market have has product X captured? We have no idea about that, right? So these choices were easy to reject. Here, if you're careful, this is easy to reject, and 4 should be the answer. Now, with this, let's do another OG question. I have kind of taken out 2 of the choices for you. This question falls under the erstwhile 700 level category. Some of you would have solved it, but let's discuss this. This, or in modern day parlance, it's 655 to 705, and let's see how we do. It's kind of based on the similar concepts to what we just discussed. We got an answer. All right. There's one candidate for A. So one candidate for A, a candidate for B. What else? One more for B. All right. All right. Let's take around 30 seconds more, and then we'll discuss this. There's a change in answer. We got B now. All right. Okay, folks. So let's discuss this. I'm happy to see that we have moved on from choice A. First, let's kind of process the question as always. So we know transportation expenses, it accounted for a large portion of the value spent on pleasure trips by US residents in a particular year, 1997. From here, it gets very interesting. About half of the total dollar spent, just give me a sec, half of the total dollar amount spent on the transportation was airfare. So make sure we process this. So if I look at the transportation expense, what is given is 50% of that is air and 50% is all others, right? That's what it meant. That's what it means when it says, air plus other, 50%, half of the total dollar spent is on airfare. Now here's where it gets interesting. However, so the author is going on presenting something interesting here. The large majority of US residents who took trips for pleasure, they did not travel by airplane, but used other means of transportation. Shiv has changed the answer. Okay, you saw something, Shiv. So for all of you who chose choice B, B is wrong, C is right. So if you fell for B, there's a trap there, and there's something to learn from that, right? So pay attention. So total expense, the total travel expense is air plus others. What we are given is air is like 50%, right? Now, what's interesting is his last sentence. The large majority of people, if I talk about number of people actually traveling, right? Number of people taking these air or whatever other means, the large majority of people who took these trips, they did not travel by airplane. So very few people travel by air. A lot of people travel by other means. And it should be interesting. How is it that very few people are traveling by air, but in terms of actual expense contribution is still 50%. Something should be adjusting it for it, right? Again, it's the art of arriving at the logical relationship. Think about what would be correspondingly high to ensure that there is still this 50% equal contribution of air and others. The minute you crack that, you will realize why choice C is correct. And I am pushing you to try and arrive at those logical relationships, finding the missing variable, the hidden variable. Think about it. Despite, yeah, Arunika, you're almost right. It's cost per person, right? So if I had to use rupees or dollars, I don't care which one you use. For simplicity, I'm just putting this. Because anyway, we're talking about dollar here, so makes sense. So the dollar per person must have been correspondingly high to ensure that air still has a 50% contribution, right? Yes, Bio, I'm happy to see that. That per mile is the red flag in choice B. So you have to ask yourself, when you read this choice, did you understand the full and complete meaning? That's where the trick is. These choices are testing you on your ability to really deep dive and understand what that means, what happens. So think about this. We are not even going to the choices yet. I'm just thinking about the scenario presented to me. Air and others have a 50-50 contribution. Air and all the non-air travel, methods. We are given that the number of people traveling by air is ridiculously small compared to the other. How then are you getting 50% equal contribution, right? Clearly, the dollar spent, the travel expense per person must be ridiculously high, correspondingly high to kind of compensate. Or in other words, the dollar per person for people who use other modes of transport must be very low, correspondingly low. If this is clear, I think you can see instantly why choice C is right. So one of my finer points is a lot of us rush to the answer choices, but sometimes there are these questions where if you just spend a few seconds on what is given to you before going to the choices, you will see the right answers, right? At least sometimes. My point is, this analysis helps you understand stuff much better. So yeah, C is clearly right. Overall, people who did not travel by airplane, they had lower average transportation expenses. So it's telling me about this group. So the people who did not travel by airplane, these guys had lower average transportation expense. So what average is this? This is essentially dollar per person. We're talking about people who did not travel. So people on average, so it's dollar per person. That's why choice C is right. But why is choice B wrong? That per mile travel changes everything. You could do it mathematically, but logically, what is being said is very simple. Uh, it does not have to be true, because even if per mile traveled, let's put it this way, even if per mile travel, those who travel by airplane actually spent less. I'm actually going against what is given. Even if they spent less, because it is possible that people who are traveling by air covered such a ridiculously high distance that you got that 50% contribution in expense. For instance, what that means is this. Let's say choice B is not true. So dollar per person per mile. Per mile travel, you're talking about per mile travel per person's exportation, per person's expense on transportation, right? So it's dollar per person per mile. Even if this particular thing is less for air compared to other modes of transport, think about what's happening. So dollar per person per mile is less for air compared to the other guy. We know that the number of people is also less for air compared to the other guys. But what if the total miles travel, the distance factor is ridiculously high for air? Such that therefore you have a 50% contribution. Is the logic clear for anyone who chose choice B? Is it clear at this point? I'm not saying you have to play around with units, but understand what can we learn from a question like this. Let me know if it's clear. Meanwhile, I'm just moving on, right? Some important takeaways. There are those questions where if you spend a bit of time to think before going to the choices, it can be useful, right? You somebody who did that analysis would spot a choice C instantly. Now, here's another thing. Don't be swayed by a tempting choice. Now, verbal is really a process of elimination game. Just because that B looks very tempting, don't go for it. Process C all the same. Maybe if you had read choice C and really processed it, you would not be able to confidently reject it. And that would make you think, am I really sure about B? But what happens is sometimes we fall in love with a particular choice and we just stick with it, right? Don't be swayed by a tempting choice. Process all the choices without fail. And yeah, for these particular types of questions, and you see this not just in inference, even in other types, think about the hidden variable. So I'm talking about sales, it's number of units into selling price. When it's talking about something like this, it's about dollar per person or something like that. So very simple, very intuitive. Nothing here is rocket science, right? So, some ideas. Now, I'm going to very quickly ensure that this theory, I'm assuming that some of you are already familiar with this, but just bear with me, just in case if there's somebody here who can benefit from this. Some key themes that we should know as far as not just inference, all of CR is concerned: coincidence, correlation, causality. You should know what these words mean exactly. When are we looking at, when are we dealing with a correlation? When are we dealing with a causality? When are we dealing with just, you know, pure random chance coincidence? We need to be clear about all that. I think the example makes it very clear. End of the day, coincidence is random chance. Things are happening purely by chance. Two events happened, they have nothing to do with each other. There is no logical connectivity at all. It's just pure chance. That's one type. An example for that is what you see here. You wear a green shirt and it so happens that it rains that day. That's just a coincidence. You cannot tell me there's some relationship there, unless you are one of those people, right? Let's talk about correlation. Correlation means there is some logical relationship connecting those two things. So typically, from the math side of things, you talk about, positive correlation, negative correlation. End of the day, when one changes, the other will also change, and it's a very predictable relationship. That is what correlation means. One event is connected to the other event in some way. And here is a real life CR style example. If I told you that ice cream sales and the use of air conditioners both tend to increase in the summer, you're not going to tell me that it's a coincidence. You're not going to tell me that ice cream sales is somehow causing more use of ACs or vice versa. What is probably the actual thing that's happening is this: the real cause for both of them is the hot weather. There's a correlation, but it's not a direct causality between the two variables, ice cream sales and use of ACs. I hope the example helps illustrate what these two terms mean. Causality, of course, is much more well known. We come across a lot of causality all over critical reasoning and nowadays in DI as well, where you have one event directly causing the other. That's called a causality, right? There's an example. Certain medication has been found to reduce blood pressure. I'm telling you that this particular medication reduces BP. It's as simple as that. There's a causality here. Now, one of the common mistakes that we tend to make is data which is presented might just be a coincidence. We start assuming things like correlation, causality. For instance, if I give you that, hey, I did one marketing campaign this month, and this month I saw an increase in sales. The mistake that we make is sometimes just assume without any basis that there's some correlation or there's some causality. Maybe my marketing campaign actually led to sales. In inference questions, don't assume that stuff. That's my point. Okay, I hope this helps. Let's talk about another set of associated concepts that's important. You also need absolute clarity on possibility, likelihood, and certainty. And very simple. Possibility, something can happen, it may happen, may not happen, but yeah, it's possible. I agree that it is possible. It's not something that's not possible. That is what possibility is. Likelihood, something is likely to happen. What I like to call it is good chance. It's a very good chance that it's going to happen, but I can't be sure, right? Certainty is there's no way in hell it's not going to happen. It's absolutely going to happen, right? And the typical mistakes that you see here is something, a lot of times, something where the maximum you can infer is possibility, but we might be saying that it's likely, right? Things like that you need to watch out for. I'm just brushing through these concepts for those of you who might benefit from this. Now, let's go into another possible trick point as far as inference is concerned. I'm just covering all the bases with some of these important ideas. Let's do this. Any of these choices could be a yes or no. So just give me yes, yes, no, or something like that. Meanwhile, to answer Shiv's question, yeah, if it was could be true, then even per mile traveled, it could be true. It will be tough to reject that choice. And I do have a could be true kind of question coming up. We'll discuss that soon. Hope that helps. Yeah. So some answers are coming in. Good to see that. No, yes, yes. No, yes, yes. Okay. Great. No, no, yes. No, yes, yes. Quite a few no, yes, yeses. So for all of you who told me the second one is a yes, I have a small surprise for you. You fell for what I call the comparison trap, right? The data is very clear. I'm telling you that electric cars were found to be quieter, they're found to be more energy efficient than gasoline cars. And of course, gasoline cars scored better on something else, long distance performance. So one is clearly a no. Electric cars are superior to gasoline cars in every way. No, I've actually given you data to say that that's not the case, right? This is a clear no. And even statement 3 should be a valid inference, right? Because I've already established that there are these parameters. So quietness, energy efficiency. So there are these parameters where perhaps electric cars are definitely better because they are quieter. You may not think that quiet is an advantage, but I also gave you energy efficient just in case. You have to think that energy efficient is an advantage, right? So electric cars have some advantages over gasoline cars. You cannot reject this. It is very much true. A lot of you fell for this. I mean, at least some of you fell for this. You said that electric cars are energy efficient is a valid inference. I disagree. What you've fallen for is the comparison trap. A simple parallel example. If I give you the statement that X is taller than Y, some of my students, if you're here, you guys are probably fed up of this example, but yeah, I use it a lot. If I give you the statement X is taller than Y, all that tells you is that X is taller. It doesn't tell you that X is actually tall. For all you know, we are dealing with midgets here. X could be some 4 feet tall and Y could be some 3.9 feet tall. Are you going to tell me that X is tall by general standards? No. So just because something is better or bigger or whatever compared to the other doesn't mean that something is big or better. Keep that in mind. I hope this is clear for all of you who chose that this is a valid inference. I hope I gave you that clarity. Now this is a very simple example, but there are very tough questions where this is the play, this is the logical play, tough choices, and we might see that. I think one of the questions I am covering this specifically, and that's a very tough question. Let's see if you guys catch it when you see it. So here I'm dealing with simple examples, but the idea is you practice this, you get used to it, you're aware of it now. So when it is staring you in the face, you'll be able to recognize it, hopefully. Right? Good. So let's do this question. All these big questions that I'm showing you are all official. Some slightly old, but pretty much all official. Okay, I see some answers coming in. Couple of candidates for D. By the way, I think you guys must have felt a slight surge in difficulty with this question. This one is slightly trickier. I think everybody likes D. A little too much for my liking, but yeah. Shiv, my point is if it is more, I all I know is it's more energy efficient than gasoline. That doesn't mean it's efficient at all, right? On a scale of 0 to 100, you know, um, it could be at 10 and gasoline could be at 2. And the 10 out of 100 is not really efficient at all. It's just that it's better than the other one. And that's the point. That's a very common trap. I see a candidate for E. So looks like most of you are done with this. So this time I took you into a slightly deep and dark territory. This is an 805 level question, at least if you go and check the stats. And Shiv, you're absolutely right, by the way. A is the right answer. You'll be surprised. And D, the very popular answer choice, by the way, it's not right. And you'll see this comparison trap I told you about kind of in play there. Yeah, so the answer is A, but let's understand what's happening here first. What are the parameters? What do we know? Let's focus on what's given first. This is a tough question, so I think I'll break it down a little bit more. When a city experiences a sharp decline in population, okay? So, by the way, don't just read English, try to engage your right brain, try to understand what the author is really trying to tell you, right? I know I keep hammering that point, but you really have to visualize the scenario. When you do that, your chances of getting these questions right absolutely bet much more. So let's go. When a city experiences a sharp decline in population, so sharp decline in population is happening. So when that happens, the city's tax revenues, okay, which pay for the city's police protection and maintenance of water, that also declines. Yeah, so when the city is experiencing a sharp decline in population, the tax revenues kind of come down. Now, this tax revenue is what pays for services like police protection and maintenance of water lines. Okay, this tax revenue is coming down. That's obviously concerning. The area to be policed and the number of and length of water lines to be maintained, however, do not decrease. What is the author really trying to say? Yeah, while the amount available might be coming down, those needs, the policing needs and those water line needs, those are not coming down. That is where it is. They do not decrease at all. In other words, we are heading towards a scenario where you don't have enough funds to do these things. That seems to be where the passage is taking us. Now, the author continues attempting to make up the tax revenue lost by raising tax rates is not feasible. In other words, oh my God, you're in a situation where you're seeing a tax revenue decline because population may be coming down, and you need money to for your policing and water maintenance stuff. But the issue is if you want to try and make money by increasing the tax rate, right? My population is coming down, but what if instead of 20% I increase the tax rate to 40% or 50%? The problem is that's not feasible. That's what is given to us. Why? Because this will actually cause even more people to leave. So you are entering a vicious cycle at this point, right? This is true of a lot of countries, including where I come from. I'm sure you guys know, right? So population is coming. When population comes down, tax revenue is going to go down. This tax revenue is what you need for police protection, maintenance, water, all of that. But those demands are not going to come down the same amount. You need those. You need that amount for that particular purpose. If you think you can just make up for the loss in tax revenue by raising taxes, not feasible. So you seem to be stuck between a rock and a hard place. What can we do, right? The information given, and look at the question stem as well, that's also very interesting. The information given most strongly supports which of the following general claims. So this is where that distinction between very pure inference, tell me what is absolutely true, versus what is most logically supported really comes to the fore. Okay, all of these are claims. All my answer choices are going to be claims, some general claims, which has some reasonable basis. Which of them can I straight away throw into the gutter? If the passage overall is clear, let's kind of go to the choices. And this time I've kind of written it down so that when you guys get the deck, you can see this logic as well. So choice A, you know, not a very popular choice clearly in this particular group, but it's a tough question and it is the right choice. Why? What does choice A says? If in a city with sharply declining population, police protection and waterline maintenance do not deteriorate, some other service will probably deteriorate. Not probably, this fair certain. Some other service will deteriorate or be eliminated. What is the logic here? What's going to happen? What's the scenario being described? Hey, if you are in a city where the population is going down, which means your tax revenue is going down as per the passage, which means the money that is going to be available for these services like police protection tentatively going down. But we are given that somehow this level of service does not deteriorate. Police protection does not deteriorate. The demand for money from police protection, waterline maintenance is the same. But somehow the city is kind of able to maintain the level. It does not deteriorate from its current level. The water lines are as good as they are, the police protection levels are as good as they are. Then you have to ask the question, how the hell is that possible? Because you are short of money at some level, right? I'm not increasing the tax. Think about that scenario. It makes sense to say that perhaps I am kind of siphoning money, I'm kind of funneling money which was otherwise devoted to some other services and diverting them into police protection and maintenance water. It kind of makes sense, right? So for those of you who didn't see choice A, are you seeing the logic here? You have to ask the question, given that there is clearly a fund shortage, population is going down, tax revenue is going down, available money therefore is not the same. I'm not even increasing tax rates. How the hell did police protection and waterline maintenance not deteriorate? For enabling that, they probably took money from some other services. So there must have been some 1 million that's allocated to police protection, and let's say 1 million that was allocated to others. They probably took money from here to fund police protection and the other one. Is that idea clear? Does choice A make sense for those of you who rejected it? Quick yes or no, quick show of hands. At the very least, this seems reasonable, so you should hold while you can reject some other choices. Quick show of hands, just so that I know, because I can clearly see that this question did not click for a lot of us, so that's why I'm spending a bit more time on this one. Yeah, thanks for that, Arunika, and anyone else, please feel free to chime in. Right. All right. So again, I'm not saying this is like the perfect choice, but remember the question type. It might be the most reasonable choice out there. Let's process the other choices. There seems to be some sense here that hey, population is going down, sharply declining population, tax revenues are not there anymore, not as much anymore. So tax revenues down. Somehow I was able to maintain police protection waterline without deteriorating. I maintained it at a certain level. I must have done something, right? I like that answer, Shiv. And by the way, that's how you should think, right? You should, think in a very creative way because that's how your brain gets engaged. I do a lot of that too. Uh, did anyone choose choice B? I don't think so. So I will skip that. You guys can come to this and check out. Um, some of you chose choice C, so I'll just discuss that. If a city's population declines sharply, police protection and waterline maintenance are the services that deteriorate the most immediately and the most markedly. Great, interesting. But we cannot be sure of this. Why? All I know is that, yeah, these are clearly somewhat important services, it looks like. All I know for sure is this can get hit, right? Given that money is going down. But we cannot be sure that this is the one that's going to deteriorate the most. There could be some other service that gets impacted much more. Just that the author is not mentioned about it. The author has not talked about it, right? Also, there's this realistic possibility that, uh, if the population declines sharply and if all these scenarios happen, tax revenue is going down, the city might prioritize police protection waterline by funneling from some other fund. That is also a realistic possibility. So my point is choice C, not so convincing. Now, Choice D. We just discussed comparisons, but I did see a lot of you falling for this comparison trap. To be fair, tough question. What's happening here? A city that suffers revenue losses because of a sharp decline in population, okay, it can make up some of the lost tax revenue by raising tax rates, okay, provided the city's tax rates are low in relation to those other cities. Okay, you see, there's a comparative angle here. Essentially, what am I telling you? Oh, if I'm the city and if I'm suffering revenue loss because of this sharp decline, I can kind of make up for it, at least some of that money, some of that tax revenue, by raising the tax rate, provided my tax rate is low compared to other cities. What is happening there? What is the assumption there? Are you assuming that just because my tax rate is low compared to others, my tax rate is low? For all you know, other cities in those regions, other cities have a tax rate of 60% or 70%. Nobody wants that. And our city's tax rate is already at 50%. It is still possible that this is absolutely too high. People are just gonna be happy to jump in any case. So just because it's lower compared to other cities, perhaps it's still very high. How can we be sure that people won't run away? For those of you who chose choice D, I hope you're seeing the logic here. For all we know, it's still a very high tax rate, man. You're not gonna be able to stem the decline. People are gonna rush away. Does this make sense? Does the logic make sense? And I'm thinking in very informal, real life ways here because that's what it actually takes. GMAT is a test of regular common sense logic rather than formal logic rules. Not as much of those. Make sense? Good to see that. Let's move. Now I'm going to take you to another territory. The some seemingly simple sentences, but I want to see if you're able to get the right ideas. Yet again, yes, no. So we solved a fairly complex. This question that we just solved is actually 805 level, and I hope that you guys benefited from that discussion. Um, Now let's come back to some basics and build for the next step, build for the next portion. As always, just give me yes, yes, no, whatever it is, whatever your answer is. Good to see. Yes, a lot of no, no, yes. So let's go through this. So, okay, no, no, yes, no, no, yes. So looks like no, no, yes is very popular. Let's kind of solve this together and see what happens. Uh, Here's one way to visualize the scenario. No, no, no's as well. So those who believe in a higher entity live a life that is peaceful. I'm not trying to push any, agenda here as far as you being a believer or a non-believer is concerned. It's just a question. Don't judge me there. So those who believe in a higher entity live a life that is peaceful. All right, let's look at that. So here's one way to think about it. So all those who believe in a higher entity, they have a life that is peaceful. That's what is given to us. Now, let me think about what this means for the other group. All I know is people who believe in a higher entity, their life is peaceful, boss. They have a life that is peaceful. What do I know about the other group here? The other group being the people who do not believe in a higher entity. Actually, if you think about it, nothing, right? They may have a life that is peaceful. They may have a life that has nothing to do with peace. And both of this is possible. I really don't know, right? I can't just assume that if I mean the people who don't believe in a higher entity don't have a peaceful life. For all you know, they may have a very peaceful life. If that is clear, with this understanding, let's kind of attack these questions. So all those who live a life that is peaceful believe in a higher entity. So actually, the answer to this should be no. I'm happy a lot of you chose this because, hey, there might absolutely be people who live a life that is peaceful but do not believe in a higher entity. Make sense? So no is the correct answer. I am happy to see nobody went wrong in this one. What about the second one? All those who do not live a life that is peaceful, they do not believe in a higher entity. What if I tell you the answer for this might be yes? Think about it. Look at the people who do not live a life that is peaceful. You notice that there is no such person in this bucket. Each and every person who believes in a higher entity lives a peaceful life. So if you are somebody who believes in a higher entity, you have a peaceful life. So if by any chance there's somebody who does not live a peaceful life, that guy cannot belong to this bucket of people who believe in a higher entity. All those people who do not live a life that is peaceful actually do not believe in a higher entity. So for all of those, when all of you gave me an answer of no, the correct answer here is yes. And these are very subtle logic patterns that, you know, uh, sometimes in CR, nowadays a lot in DI, you get tested on some of this. You should know this. Does this make sense? Double negative. Yeah, exactly like the prompt. Yeah, of course. But does the logic make sense? And why is that? I mean, I showed this to you visually, but even verbally, you can kind of think about it, right? Everyone who believes in a higher entity has a peaceful life. So, if by any chance there is somebody who does not have a peaceful life, that person cannot be amongst those believers, right? Because we already established that if you are a believer, you have a peaceful life. So, if you're somebody who does not have a peaceful life, how can you be a believer, right? That's the verbal way of doing it, but yeah, you can think of a visual like this as well. Ways to visualize. The same way you visualize, overlapping sets using those 2 by 2 tables, the same way you use tree diagrams and all. A similar way to think about it. I think most of you are right here. At least some of those who live a life that is peaceful believe in a higher entity. By the way, this is a yes, and I'm happy most of you got that. Because clearly we have established that there are this group of people who believe in a higher entity and people who do have a peaceful life. So it's clearly true that at least some of those who live a peaceful life definitely believe in a higher entity. So the answer to this is no, yes, yes. Some of you got it right. Especially the second one, a lot of you got it wrong. I hope this helps. Why does all this matter? Uh, it's not just in critical reasoning. Nowadays, you're getting tested in data insights on some of these ideas. So uh, you need that. Great question, Arunika. So actually, when you say those, it practically means all those. It's same to same, right? Those, when I say those who believe, that means all those who believe. There's nobody else, right? If I say those who believe in a higher entity, that means pretty much everyone who believes. There's nobody else. So when you say those, the implied idea there is all those. I'm glad that you brought that question. It looks like it's a common question. So when you say those, it actually means all those by default. And it doesn't have to mention all those. It's understood. When I say those who believe in a higher entity, I'm not saying some of those, right? I'm not saying some of those, a few of those. No. When I say those, it's a blanket statement. All those. It's understood. Good. Excellent question. That's how we roll. Very good. So now let's talk about something that's extremely important, especially given the focus edition now, which is conditional statements. Why focus edition? Because we're seeing a lot of these questions in DI. Of course, not as simple as what I've given here. You see nice twisted versions of it, but the underlying logic is here, right? So this is again a yes, no, no, yes, yes, no question. Which of these statements, I mean, any of these statements could be a valid inference. Let me know. I like the speed with which you're doing this now. Great. So this is an example of conditional statements. What do I mean by conditional statements? Those pesky little statements that have this if kind of architecture, right? Again, very important, very extremely important now with DI. But yeah, essentially what I've given you is if A, then B, right? So all of you who told me no, no, yes, all of you are right. I'm happy that I think you guys have understood this. You guys have studied this. You're very clear about it. I'm very happy. But let's decode. If a fruit is rotten, then it's going to be discarded. Now, does that mean that if a fruit is discarded, then it's rotten? Not really. Why? Because I might discard a fruit for other reasons. I might discard a fruit for reason X, I might discard a fruit for reason Y. So just because I observe that a fruit is discarded, I can't just assume that it was rotten. Maybe it is because of reason X, which is why this is not a valid inference. What, and there are actually, if you go to, if you go and explore the contours of these ideas, there are specific terms for this, right? But I'm not going to bore you with all that. This is converse, inverse, contrapositive. None of that matters. You should know what it is practically, right? So this is not a valid inference. What about the second one? If a fruit is not rotten, then it is not discarded. This is very similar to what we saw, right? If somebody is believing in a higher entity, that person is peaceful. But what do you know about the scenario where they do not believe in a higher entity? Nothing. In a very similar way, if a fruit is not rotten, what happens? We don't know. Maybe it's going to be discarded. Maybe it's not going to be discarded. We have no idea. This is also valid inference, right? This is also not a valid inference. So no and no, absolutely right. The third one, yeah, what they like to call contrapositive, is essentially one of the most important patterns that you should know. So if I give you that the scenario that the fruit is not discarded, then definitely it could not have been rotten. Why? If it was rotten, I would have discarded it. So if you notice that I have not discarded it, it logically follows that the fruit was not rotten. So this is what is called as if not B, then not A. Again, very important to keep in mind. Uh, I see a lot of two-part analysis questions where our students go wrong because they've just interchanged this A and B, nothing else. They've done all the hard work to try and analyze it, but that small bit of clarity was not there, and we ended up choosing the exact opposite. So here's a question that's actually from the LSAT, but very relevant to this. Why don't you give it a whirl and tell me what the answer is? We're going to discuss the same thing here again, Bio. Don't worry about it. It's coming right up. This is a regular question, guys, so there's only one correct answer. Don't give me yes, no's, and all. Yeah. All right. One answer down. Anyone else? Okay. One candidate for C, couple of candidates for E. Okay. So let's move. So the correct answer is E. So Shiv and Bio, you got it right. Bio, you asked a doubt about it, but it looks like you understand it pretty well. So you got the right answer there. I might be mispronouncing your name, yeah. Please forgive me for that. So E is the right answer, everyone. So the idea is it's actually an application of what we just did, right? What do I know? If by any chance the country does intervene, if it does not intervene militarily, rather, we are given the not scenario. If the country does not intervene militarily, then this entire region is going to definitely fall under enemy influence. This is what is given to us. And again, think about the other group, because that's what the question is asking you. What happens if the country actually intervenes militarily. This is exactly what we discussed, right? I only know what happens if the country does not intervene. Then definitely that region is gonna fall under enemy influence. And feel free to use real life examples. There are wars happening all over the world. Feel free to pick your poison, pick your version, right? But what happens if a country intervenes militarily? I have no idea. Am I assuming that this is some very strong military that will absolutely gonna destroy the enemy? Maybe, or maybe not. That could be a useless military that cannot do anything. So in reality, I have no idea what will happen if the military does intervene. Anything could happen. The place could still fall under enemy influence, or the place may not fall under enemy influence. The reality is, I have no idea which of these outcomes is going to happen. I cannot even be sure, right? So, therefore, that's why the answer is may or may not fall. That's why we had this discussion on possibility, probability, certainty that's coming in here. I have no idea what will happen if the country intervenes militarily, country X intervenes militarily. Therefore, no idea. Therefore, may or may not. It could happen. It could not happen. I have no idea. That's the point. Some of you chose C. C means that you're assuming that there is a high chance, there's a pretty high probability, which again is not really inferable. So, Shiv, to answer your question, if you go and check on GMAT Club, this would be a 605 to 655. So, for me, it qualifies as a medium question. But if you look at the stats, you'll be surprised. Less than 60% of people get it right. It's like 53, 54% of people get it right. So, by stats, a lot of people fall in this. But by classification, it is still medium. It should not be that difficult, right? But that tells you why these discussions are important. All those fundamentals have to be in place, right? So probably is the problem. But exactly, probably is the problem. Probably means that, hey, if the country X does intervene militarily, then there is a very good chance that the place will not fall under enemy influence. But are you sure about that? Without knowing anything about how strong the enemy is, how strong this military is, what is the geopolitical situation out there, can you really say that just because this country is going to intervene militarily, there's a very good chance it won't fall under enemy influence? Are we sure about that? So this probability is very, very sketchy, right? How do you know that there's a very good chance? I hope that makes sense. So the only reasonable conclusion is, yeah, I have no idea what can happen. Maybe it falls under enemy influence, maybe it does not. God knows. Let's see. So may or may not fall. Right? This is the right answer. Like 55%, 54% kind of accuracy if you go and check this. Right. Now, this is a version of it. You guys can do this as homework at this point. I'm giving homework here. Feel free to, check it out. B and C are same. Shiv, tell me, fall under and not fall under. Are you gonna tell me B and C are the same? It's opposite, right? Yeah. You guys can try this at home. And I've anyway given you the answers also here. So in case anybody has some doubt. Likewise, this concept also we've kind of touched upon is just a slightly higher version. Let's solve a few OG questions now to wrap up. My objective here is to give you some different question types. So here you're seeing the fill in the blank type. And then, of course, I have some other questions as well. Let's do a couple of questions and then wrap up. I think we have almost at the 2 hour mark. So try this question, let me know. Of course, I'm telling you that this is an inference question, so you don't have to figure it out. But I hope that as you read it, you can figure it out. Don't assume it's a strengthened question. The questions that I've skipped, by the way, feel free to put your answers in the YouTube comments. I'm happy to come and check those if you have doubts. Right? All right, let's go. All right, we have one candidate for choice B, and let's see. Okay, are there any more answers? Are you guys done trying? All right. So, one candidate for B, one candidate for D. All right. Another 30 seconds and then I'll probably start. That's enough time for this. All right. Good time to start discussing. Thanks a lot, Shiv, Arunika, and Akanksha, for putting in your choices. Really appreciate that. So it's between B and D, but let's understand what's going on in this particular question. Now, this is a type of CR question, as in it's not a very strict type that you can go and find and search, but those questions that feel like logic puzzles where you have to, it might be better to put pen to paper and kind of figure out and kind of map out the scenarios. It's, I believe, that kind of question. So you would have benefited if you had put pen to paper for this one. I believe, at least it did for me. So perhaps it would do the same for you. It's that kind of question. It feels like there's a logic puzzle aspect to it. Let's solve. What do you know? Lyme disease is caused by a bacterium transmitted to people by deer ticks. Okay. So this disease is caused by a bacterium. It's transmitted to humans by something called deer ticks. Okay. Let's call them DT. Deer ticks are almost never born infected with the bacterium, but they can pick it up from feeding on an infected host in any of the three successive staged elements, and you see this. At this point, I actually start mapping this because this seems like very specific conditions, right? So I know that when the deer tick is born, practically it does not get infected. It doesn't, it's not born with the infection, right? But it can pick up the infection at any of those three successive stages of development. There are three stages: there's larva, there is nymph, and then there is adult. Great. The point is, it could pick up the infection by feeding on an infected host in any of these stages. So it could pick up here, it could pick up here, it could pick up here. Once infected, a tick remains infected through any subsequent. So, in other words, if the deer tick picked up an infection in the larval stage, it is infected for life. That does not change. Similarly, if the deer tick picks up an infection in this stage, nymph stage, it is infected for life. And of course, after adult stage, the deer tick dies. There's nothing more, right? Because we are given there's only three successive stages. There are three stages here. This last line is important. But since a tick feeds on only one host in each stage, this is very interesting. So for this stage, there is a host. This stage, there is a unique individual single host. Similarly, for this stage also, there is a host. Very interesting. It follows that. So I hope you guys realize this is an inference question. What logically follows? Now, the debate is between choices B and D. So let's kind of focus on that first, and then if there are any other doubts, I'm happy to explain those as well. Let's focus on choice D because it does look popular. People infected with the Lyme disease bacterium cannot transmit bacterium to adult ear ticks. Now, notice what this is doing, right? All I know is about deer ticks and deer ticks possibly infecting humans. Choice D is trying to tell me that hey, those people who are infected with Lyme disease, they cannot transmit bacterium to adult ear ticks. You think this is not possible, but maybe it is very much possible. For all you know, the host 3, the host for the deer tick in the adult stage is an infected human. This is possible, right? And maybe this infected human can absolutely infect the deer tick at this stage. There is nothing in the passage which says that a scenario like this is not possible. Those of you who chose choice D, have I convinced you that choice D does not make as much sense? People infected with the Lyme disease bacterium, so people as in human beings infected, they cannot transmit this bacterium to adult deer ticks. But what if there is a free from infection deer tick that reaches the adult stage and the host is a human? After all, human host is possible, right? That's how the disease gets transferred to humans also when a deer tick infects the human. And therefore, choice D is not really necessarily true. It doesn't follow from the passage. It's very much possible. I don't know if it's possible, but it is. I mean, I don't know if it's the reality, but I cannot say that it is not possible. And therefore, D is a bit of a red flag. Now let's focus on that other choice, which is choice B. And for those of you who chose choice B, congrats, you are absolutely right. Choice B is a very valid inference. And it's like a logical puzzle. You have to see the pieces and see what happens. People cannot be infected by a tick that picked up the Lyme disease bacterium in the adult stage. Remember that there is only one host for each stage. So, if there is a deer tick which picked up the disease thanks to an infected host at the adult stage, there is no further stage. Na? It's not like after this, in some supernatural stage, is going to transmit to humans. How can a person be infected by a deer tick, which itself is becoming infected in the adult stage? There is no further stage for this tick to come and attach to a human being, which is why this is the correct answer. Does this make sense? Which is why it says people cannot be infected. It's not possible for people to be infected by a tick if the tick is picking it up in the adult stage. The others are all possible, and that's why you reject a choice like A and all that. If a deer tick gets infected, let's say in the previous stage, then in the adult stage, lo and behold, its host is a human being, and it's possible that this infected deer tick will make the human infected. Possible. But if it's already getting infected only in the adult stage, there is no further stage. And in every stage, there's only one host allowed. So it's already infected thanks to some other host in the adult stage. There's no further stage for humans to come in and get infected. That's why choice B is absolutely spot on. It's the right answer. If there is any other choice, let me know. Else, we can move on. We could do another question and then wrap up for the day. You can quickly process a choice A. People can be infected only by being bitten by a tick that is either in larval or in lymph stage. No, maybe the tick got infected in the lymph stage or in the larval stage, but once it became an adult, it latched onto a human host and infected the human. Very much possible. So to say that can be infected only by larval or nymph, not necessary. It could be a person can be infected at the adult stage as well. So that's an example of choice A as well. So is this clear? Can we move on? Very quick show of hands. Yes, if you're comfortable. So those of you who got choice B, very good. I can see that the correct inferential thinking is there. And for the rest, I'm sure we are learning. All right. Okay. So, in terms of pattern, there is something here as well, which these are the kind of there's some questions like this which feel like there's a logic. It's like a logic puzzle. You have to put in the pieces. The minute I saw, okay, it's not catching anything. It's not born infected, but larva, nymph. So all these conditions are being given. So when all these conditions are being given, it feels like a logic puzzle. My advice is perhaps put pen to paper. It might be easier rather than do these things mentally. Right? Think about that. Let's do another pattern. My job today is to really expose you to various patterns of inference questions, right? So here is another pattern. Again, watch the question very carefully. Don't make silly mistakes. And we can wrap up with this one. I have one more question. We can do that as homework. You guys can let me know in the comments if you have any doubts, right? Any answers yet? Any confident answers yet? All right, that's the first confident answer. There's a choice B. Okay. Confused between A, B, and D, but I feel it's B. Oh, that's nice. Interesting. There's more of A. This is the last question. The next question I had is actually, from a type perspective, we've already discussed it, so you could just do it as homework and let me know if you have any doubts. I'm happy to address that. There's an A, there's a B. Nice. I'll give it another 30 seconds. All right, good. Everyone, good job, good attempt there. Now, this also is definitely not an easy question, though it looks very small and tiny. But firstly, I hope all of you took my advice and read the question stem carefully. Now, whether it is DI or CR or RC, I emphasize on this with everyone I work with. Don't just jump to the choices. Always look at what this question is telling you. Here, what do we need? If the critic statements are true, so given that these statements are true, each of the following could be true except. So, in other words, I have these five choices. I need that one choice that cannot be true. All the other four choice, yeah, it could be true. We are not looking for a must be true. We are looking for a, yeah, it could be true. Big difference, right? So you don't have, your meter has to change for a question like this. You're not looking for a pure inference in the sense that yes, this must be true. If it could be true, that's a wrong choice. We need that one thing that cannot be true. Okay. That clarity is important, which is why we are discussing this question type. So it's a could be true except question. So now I'm seeing more B's come in. Yeah, B is the right answer. So A, D, those ones are not right. Okay. But let's understand what's happening. Emily Dickinson's poetry demonstrates that meaning cannot reside entirely within a poem itself, but is always the unique result of an interaction between a reader's system of beliefs and the poem. Hold on, that's a lot. And again, it looks like a humanities topic in a CR passage, in a CR question. But yeah, we get those. So Emily Dickinson's poetry, it kind of shows, it demonstrates that the meaning of a poem does not reside entirely within a poem. So in other words, meaning transcends the poem. What is it trying to say? What is the author trying to say? The meaning of a poem, it's the unique result of an interaction between the poem itself and a individual person's system of beliefs. And think real life, what does this mean? The way I interpret a poem, the kind of meaning I extract from a poem, it kind of depends on what my core beliefs are. So somebody else with a different belief, they will have a different meaning. They will take a different meaning from the poem. They'll interpret it differently. That's what it's trying to say. So the poem may be the same, but based on different people's belief systems, the way you interpret meaning will change. I hope that is clear. The second sentence is the second part is also very interesting. And of course, any two readers from different cultures or eras have radically different systems of beliefs. Think about what this is trying to tell you. The author is giving to you as a fact that any two readers from different cultures or different eras. What does it mean to say different era? Different time periods. Somebody from the 19th century versus somebody from the 21st century. The author is giving you as a fact that such guys will have different beliefs. So, even before going to the choices, if I really think about what this data is given, I know that the way I interpret a poem varies based on my belief. So, somebody with belief one interprets it in a certain way, somebody with belief two interprets it a certain way. Now, I'm told that if you take two people from different cultures, those beliefs are different. If you take two people from different eras, those beliefs are different. What can I infer from these two statements? That means that if I take two people from a different culture, by default, their interpretation will be different. Why? Because we are given as a fact that their beliefs are different. Similarly, if I give you two people from a different era, from a different time period, in other words, by default, by definition, not definition, by default, their belief systems are different. That's given to us as a fact. And because their belief systems are different, the way they interpret the poem completely different. I hope you guys see what the correct choice is based on everything we just discussed. It is choice B, it has to be choice B. Look at what choice B says. A modern reader, so somebody from the modern era right now, and a 19th century reader. We are clearly not in the 19th century, so it's kind of clear that we're talking about different eras. So a modern reader and a 19th century reader, they interpret one of Shakespeare's sonnets in the same way. This cannot be true, right? Clearly, because they are from different eras, they have different belief systems, and because they have different belief systems, they will interpret the same poetic work in a different way. So to say that they will interpret it in the same way, this is that one statement in this but entire set of choices that cannot be true, right? So if anyone is wondering why is it choice B, it's talking about Shakespeare's sonnets where the passage is about Dickinson. Dickinson Dickinson's poetry demonstrates this point, but it's applicable to all poetry. It doesn't say that it's only about Emily Dickinson's poetry. I hope everyone who did not get choice B is very clear on why choice B is the correct choice at this point. I hope. What are the other common choices? Let's go one by one. A reader's interpretation of a poem by Dickinson is affected by someone else's interpretation of it. This can be true. My interpretation, my belief system can be changed by somebody else's interpretation. I may read somebody's interpretation that might change my own belief system, and that it can therefore affect how I interpret. This is possible, so I reject it. A reader's interpretation of a poem evolves over time. Again, think real life. In real life, our beliefs also evolve over time. It's very much possible that this happens. Because if my belief changes, then of course, my interpretation of a particular poetic work also changes. What about choice D? I did see, yeah, some of you did choose choice D. A couple of you did choose choice D. Two readers from the same era arrive at different interpretations of the same poem. Ha. It's possible, right? I know same era, but even within same era, the people could have completely different cultures, and therefore they could arrive at different interpretations. So same era, but let's take that example. Maybe different cultures, and because they have different cultures, they have different beliefs. Because they have different beliefs, their interpretation can be completely different. So this is possible, and therefore I reject it. A reader's enjoyment of a poem is enhanced by knowing the poet's interpretation of it. Yeah, possible. Knowing the poet's interpretation might alter my own belief system. It might change how I interpret things. Also, this is talking about enjoyment rather than interpretation. That's also a big red flag, but it could be true. I don't have anything to say that this will not happen. So all those reasons why B is the right answer. This one is 705805. I felt it's a bit tricky because the content is a little more humanities style, and some of us do struggle with it. So again, notice the various question types under this big family called inference, right? This is both could be true and accepted. So it's a combination, it's a hybrid of a lot of stuff. Good. I think we are done at this point. This question is one of my favorite questions. We could do it as homework. In terms of covering all the major question types, I think I'm done. You could try this question. Let me know if you have doubts. Put it on the comments. I'm happy to come and check it out. Right? Some quick takeaways. Yeah. Really read the question stem carefully. That's something I really want you to take away from the last 2-3 questions. We saw a few examples where putting pen to paper is not a bad idea. Don't be under this idea that all of verbal has to be done mentally. Even I used to think like that, and I do have that arrogance that I can probably pull it off. But there are questions where you will benefit if you put pen to paper. Mostly feels like there are a lot of conditions given, and the same types you see in DI with all those logic puzzle type questions, right? Think about that. And of course, in everything that we're doing, you're seeing that GMAT CR is not isolated from real world ideas, real world thinking, real world logic. So, think real life. Don't just read English for the sake of reading English and try to piece things together. CR and inference is actually a lot more nuanced and real world than you think it is. Don't just read it in a very dry way. These are some parting thoughts, but I think throughout the session, I've given you quite a few takeaways. That's it from my side. Any questions, any other comments? Let me change the view. Let me know, guys. We're done. Hope you got something useful out of it. Any general feedback is also happy to take that. And hope you guys learned something useful. Make sure the deck is shared. I do have it here with me, but maybe we could just put it in the description of the video or something for future reference. You guys will get it at some point. Questions, feedback, any specific question types that you want me to do in the future? I mean, I do have assumption family coming up next, but if there's something else you have in mind, let me know. I'm happy to do this. My portion is mostly in this collab with GMAT Club. My portion is mostly on the verbal content. So things like this, if I'm picking inference, I'm gonna give you a lot of details about inference, how to go about it. If I'm picking assumption family, it's gonna be about assumption, strengthen, weaken, so on and so forth. Boldface, if necessary, happy to do that as well. Let me know where you guys are struggling. I'm happy to, try and help you at the very least. How do you access these lives? Oh, this is on YouTube. It's there forever. So you can always come and just check. This video link will work, right? Weekend is a struggle. Thanks for mentioning that. Weekend is actually one of the more important question types. It really pushes that implication muscle. Each and every choice, you have to first understand what it's explicitly telling you. Then you have to understand what the author is trying to tell you, what's the suggested implication. And then, assuming that's true, you have to do an analysis. Does it strengthen? Does it weaken? Some people do struggle with it. I totally understand. It's actually one of the important question types. My next session will cover quite a bit of weaken. So we'll do a bit of assumption. We'll do quite a bit of weaken. It's coming. I think it's coming in 2 weeks or something, right? Your future lives. Oh, I don't understand that. Bullface, got it. Future lives. Yeah, I think just watch the space. This is thanks to GMAT Club. I have this opportunity. I didn't tell you. My last video with GMAT Club, my last webinar was a couple of years ago. It's been a while since I've been on this channel, but I will be on this channel in another 2 weeks, I think. Just watch the space. You will come to know whenever we are doing this. Flaw. Of course, flaw is a tough cookie. I consider flaw as one of the toughest question types out there, along with, let's say, inference as well. So yeah, let me see. Flaw, boldface, let's try to, work that in. Fair enough. All feedback is welcome. Let's see where we go with it. Any other general commentary? If you guys like this video, you found something useful from this webinar, consider putting an actual like. Let that YouTube algorithm also, do something. What else? Yeah, that's about it. If there are no further questions, I think we are done. Thanks for being with me. I know we have stretched a little over the mark. I think this was expected to be a 2 hour 15 minutes, hitting the 2.5 hours. Thanks for bearing with me. Hope you got something useful. I look forward to seeing you at my next session. See ya. Have a good night or day.